Jeff Weir, welcome to Stay Humble podcast. How are you feeling today?
Yeah, I'm feeling really good actually, and I know that is often a stock answer, but I've had a good day in terms of where my energy's gone. I've spoken to a couple of people today who give me energy as well as take energy from me, but that's meant I've had enough energy for my little girl when I picked her up for school, and the kind of the pre-dinner and then post-dinner activities that we do before bed. So yeah, it's great to be joining you and being able to spend some time with you. So thank you first and foremost for inviting me along.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. And obviously, last month you released your newest book, which I have a copy right here, which is Stuck. Now What? And I want to ask you firstly, what inspired you to write Stuck Now What?
This is really interesting that you asked me today, because I've posted something out on LinkedIn today, which is it's 12 months since I walked into my publisher's offices down in London, and I travelled down to London on an early train on that. It was a Monday, not a Tuesday, but it was the 16th of March. And in my own mind, I was going to write a book about work-life balance because that's the space I'd been operating in and researching for probably the best part of 3-4 years. So that was my intention. I spent 4.5 hours with these guys, Layla and Ali, a brother and sister combination. And by the end of it, I got back on the train traveling home, and I was going to write a book about people in work, people who got stuck in their career. And the title, I'll share this with you now, the working title at the time was This Is Work, But It's Not Working. And it was supposed to be a clever play on the fact that a lot of us get up and go to work each morning, but actually when we come home and we have conversations with the important people in our life and we maybe moan about this or we moan about that, it's like, hang on, this is work, but something's not working. I'm glad we never went with that. I'm glad we went with Stuck Now What, after lots of back and forth, with my editors. But really, my reason for writing the book was it's something that I'd wanted to do for many years. I feel quite fortunate that I was able to do it during the last 12 months, given, how this will be marked in history. But the reality was, this was something that I'd talked about back in 2009. And I'd set myself a goal to write a book within 7 years. So clearly I never achieved that, but that seed of an idea was always there in my head. And consciously, towards the back of 2019, going into the start of last year, I cleared some time in my diary, which meant that I could write. And then ultimately what happened was we went into lockdown quite quickly, and I found I had a lot of time on my hands to actually get on and do it. So
it seemed quite conveniently that obviously lockdown happened when you was writing this book as well. So it's giving you that opportunity to compose it, really.
And I do very much see it like that, David. If I'm honest, I know we're still in a strange place in terms of work and the virus itself. But similar to being made redundant in 2014, that was a blessing for me because it meant that I could go and set up my own business. In many ways, whilst I wouldn't say this was a blessing, it did naturally give me that opportunity to sit down and write. So I'm hugely thankful for what's happened, to me and in my life over the last 12 months.
Yeah, and I just want to talk in terms of the book itself, and I just wanted to firstly delve into it in terms of the 4 fears. And could you go into a bit more detail about each of them?
Yeah, you're going to have to remind me, in which order I've written them, to be fair. I wrote quite generally about fear initially because I felt it myself and I'd seen it myself in terms of my own behavior and preventing me from doing things. But then when I got into the book and I started writing it, the editors were quite direct in terms of we've got something here that we can build on, because in their mind they were thinking, and I ultimately went on to think the same thing, that actually fear can manifest itself in many ways. So I looked at it generally initially and then went in and broke down the different elements of fear.
And do you feel this is one of the main things that people obviously come to you in terms of your day-to-day work is they've got a fear of change or fear of failing and stuff like that. Is that a common sort of what you come across every day?
It is a lot of what I come across, either the fear of change or the fear of failure. And I think both are inherent in our conditioning and our upbringing. And I tell a story in the book, and it's a very personal story, albeit it might not come across that it's me in that class. But I was that person in the class in front of 30 other people, 30 other kids at the age of 7 that put my hand up and got a question wrong. And actually, kids at that age are quite brutal in terms of, reminding you that you got something wrong and the embarrassment that goes with that. And I pretty much felt failure and shame that day, to the point where it prevented me from putting up my hand in class on many, many occasions after that. And I never really gave it any thought at that point until I arrived in the corporate world. And I'd go to meetings and I'd represent the learning and development team. And I still had this same fear of failing or being viewed as a failure. And if we're not careful, what happens with this particular fear of failure is we use it as a way to not do things. So we will say that we'll have a go, or we will say we'll try, but actually the fear is so strong and it's talking to us in such a way that actually we walk away afterwards and we think, I'm not going to do that just in case I fail. And I've experienced it. I've failed many, many times. I'm quite open about that. My first business, in many ways failed, but actually there's so much learning that comes from failure that if we can find the courage to have a go, even if we fail, we'll have learned something that will serve us well going forward. The challenge, I think, with change is we do get used to so many things being as they are, and we get comfortable. And you'll be familiar with this yourself. We get into that comfort zone. So the moment somebody comes along and says change, little kind of light bulb goes off in the head that says, "Oh no, panic! This means there's going to be a shift." I actually think what we've gone through over the last 12 months is synonymous with that. We've had to adapt and we've had to evolve. And this is the really good thing about human beings when it comes to changes. They can go through change. We do go through change. But to take it back to your original question, those two fears alone will stop people either having a go at something or moving out of the space that they're in. And for me, all that does is, again, in the context of the book, it just compounds this stuck feeling that many people feel on a daily, weekly basis, where they don't feel they can go and do anything different.
Yeah, I would totally agree in terms of all 4 fears, if I'm honest. In the last 12 months, I think they've affected people in every regard. Like you also mentioned in your book, obviously, the fear of security and the fear of being you. I think with the lockdowns and the sort of isolation and the not security of not knowing if you've got a job and stuff like that, all them sort of 4 fears have all been prevalent in people this year, or in the last 12 months in people. I think that's certainly what I've noticed just speaking to you now. I think it's been so prevalent.
But the great thing, David, is you and I are affected by the same thing. So, even though I can write with a degree of experience and confidence around those fears, I've experienced all 4 of those fears this year. There was a time during the writing process when I thought, hang on a minute, what if no one reads the book? What if no one picks it up? The easiest thing for me, like many people, would have been to carry on doing what I was doing. But actually, it doesn't serve a purpose. It doesn't necessarily enable us to move forward. So in many ways, I'm exactly like everybody else. And I've experienced, as you just alluded to there, those 4 fears during the last 12 months, like everybody else. But I've been able to learn from them. And that's the key.
And I'd like to talk in terms as well, the main part of your book as well, about which is based obviously on the 6 V's. Can you elaborate on each of them and how they all link together?
Yeah, this was something that we created together, me and the publishing team. It's not something that I walked into their offices clear in my own mind. The beauty of being able to download or distill a load of stories and share a load of examples with, an objective audience in terms of the publishers was, by the end of that conversation and discussion, we had a structure and an outline or a framework which, unbeknown to me, I've been doing this work for, the best part of 17, 18 years in the learning and development space, but I'd never called it the 6 Vs. I never had that framework. And part of me wishes I had. And part of me would love to say, I walked into the publisher's office, I knew exactly what it was going to look like. This was going to be the crux of the book, and the rest was just the wrapper at the front and the back. It wasn't like that at all. As I've said, I thought I was going in to write a book around work-life balance. The start, or the very first of those 6 Vs, is vision. And I talk really passionately about this because having your own vision, I think, still is a relatively new concept. If I said to you, David, what's your vision of success right now? I might be talking a slightly different language to what you have experienced in the past. A lot of us are aware of goals or objectives, or indeed New Year's resolutions, which some people fall into the trap of setting in January or on the 31st of December. But a vision of success is aspirational. It's not where we are now. It's a point in the future. And there might not necessarily be a fixed point in the future, but there's something that we are striving towards or we're working towards. But with that picture of success, it does get us to hone in on the journey as well, and not just the end point. And this is where I think it differs to goal setting, because sometimes with goal setting, the only thing we're focused on is the end result. And I see this, in lots of the sales teams that I work with. They're just focused on the numbers. And actually, they lose sight of the journey along the way. They just focus on the number every single day. And if they don't get it today, then it rolls over to tomorrow. And it's the same number that they're aiming for by the end of the week. It's not particularly empowering and actually can be quite limiting. And that, for me, is the difference with a vision of success. It should fire you up every morning and remind you of where you're working towards, knowing that actually you are going to have some obstacles along the way. I'm a big believer in the Stoic philosophy, and a lot of the work that Ryan Holiday has done recently to bring that into the 21st century. What is in the way, what is part of this way in terms of your vision of success becomes the way, not hit that first barrier, obstacle, and think, this isn't for me, I'll go and do something else. So I think it's really important that we start there as well, because that's the bit that fires us up. And then we get into looking at values. And again, I still think this is a relatively new concept for individuals to look at and to explore. You've probably worked in organizations, and many of the people listening to your podcast will have worked in organizations where they perhaps have a vision or a strategy, and they perhaps have corporate values, and these might appear in reception or on laminated posters around the office to remind people of what they stand for. I think what's fascinating is when you get into your personal values, you realize why you get out of bed in the morning. And I shared this with a group of people back in February when we did a bit of a live learning session. I got them to go through a values exercise. When you understand what your values are, you know when you're in alignment with your organization and the work that you're doing, and when you're also out of alignment. And I get people to focus in on their top 5 values. And the exercise is in the book. If you follow that exercise, what will happen is you'll end up with a list of values, and then you'll be able to see your top 5. And if you're honest with yourself, you'll then go through those top 5 and you'll say, which ones are present right now? And if you've got 3 or 4, or indeed 5, the likelihood is what you're doing right now, you're really happy with. And you're not moaning to your partner, or you're not saying this is crap, or you're not looking for another job. But if you've only got 1 or 2, the likelihood is your conversations at home, even your conversations with your colleagues are demonstrating that actually your values aren't aligned to what you're doing in work. And it has an impact down the line in terms of stress, anxiety, depression, mental health, all of those things, just by having that awareness of our values. So those are the first two V's. We then look at where you are right now. So what I call your current view. So wherever you want to be in the future, your vision of success, we look at what your values are, because they can help you in terms of moving towards that. But we also start with where you are now. And it's important to understand what your view looks like, because there's certain things that, again, will enable you, but there's also certain things to consider that may well be holding you back. And this is where we start a little bit of the deep work in terms of looking at ourselves and thinking, what's working, what's not working, what can I build on, what can I change? And a lot of this then goes back to the fear bit, because the things we want to change are the scary things, the things we haven't done before. It means we might have to speak to somebody different. It means we might have to go out there, and I do this most weeks actually, go out there and kind of ask for help or ask for ideas from somebody else, when really we think we ought to come up with them ourselves. So we look at our current view, then we look at how we create a vehicle for change. And this is very different to a plan, okay? Because I know lots of people either like plans or don't. They like to-do lists or they don't. They like Stephen Covey's urgent and important matrix, or they don't. This is about you taking ownership, but taking into consideration what's going on in your world right now that you can change in the next few weeks and then in the next few months. Because we're programmed and we're conditioned in a way right now, especially, to want to fast forward and arrive at that vision of success tomorrow. I can remember working with a load of managers at Phones for You, actually, and I would say to them, what's your vision of success? And they'd say, I want to be a deputy manager. Right, okay. And what about after that? I want to be a general store manager. Okay, when? Well, tomorrow. Okay, it's not going to happen tomorrow. And if you all want to be managers tomorrow, that ain't going to happen. So we need to look at what you can change now, and then a little bit further down the line, and you get momentum. You'll know yourself. If you ever set out to learn something new or work towards achieving something, you need to take some scary steps, and then you build confidence, and then you build momentum, and then you keep moving and keep moving and keep moving.
I just wanted to butt in there. Sorry, I was just going to say, I think you put it perfectly together in terms of vision. When you quote it as vision without action is a dream, action without vision is a nightmare.
It is, because it's for me, it's a scattergun approach. It's like, I know I need to do something, so I'll just do something. But then you can quickly get to the end of a month, the end of a year, and look back and think, well, what have I done? Well, and in many ways, this period right now is a fascinating time to look at your vision of success, because anybody that would have looked at it last year, it didn't play out. But if that vision of success is still important to you, if it's still driving you each day to get out of bed and it still fires you up, then it's still relevant and you can still work towards it. I see a lot of people, usually at quarterly reviews or half-year appraisals, or even indeed end-of-year reviews, get excited about what that next bit might be, but then don't do anything with it. And it's because they just haven't allowed themselves to spend any time really reflecting on it. Mm-hmm. The last two V's, to me, I like to build things up. And the last two V's really, are about people being bold and being brave. I called it valor. Originally, it was going to be victory, but I wasn't happy with that. For me, it's about moments of courage and being brave. And if I look back over my journey, where I've made progress, it's usually been when I've been brave and I've done something outside of my comfort zone that I was scared about doing, but I survived. I was okay. It was never as bad as I thought it was going to be. And it kind of builds that momentum again. And the final one is what I call voice. And it's twofold, because it's the voice in our head that says you can't do it. Or why do you think you can do it? But who are you? People talk about imposter syndrome. It's real. because we all have the voice in our head that will, kind of call us back. And there's reasons why, we're programmed in a way that, we have this inbuilt protection mechanism that says, that's scary. You've not done it before. You sure you want to do it? You don't have to do it. How about you come back in, have a cup of tea and just carry on doing what you're doing? And it talks us down. So it's twofold. Firstly, it's about how you amplify your own voice, but then it's about how you build your voice with those people around you. And I have to say, one of the most important things and fundamental things that has helped me enormously through the last 12 months is those people on my personal board, as I described them. So there's an exercise in there that I get people to think about. Who's on your personal board? Who can you go to? Who can you ask those questions to? Who's walked a similar path in the past that you can learn from, that you can reach out to? I use Carl Jung's archetypes to help people really distinguish between the type of people that they have on their board and where some of those gaps might be, so that they can fill their board with those other archetypes.
I must say, like, you've really explained the 6 V's so well there, and I must talk about, in terms of, like you say, your vision of success. It's so prevalent in your book, but why do you think people still suffer, like, in terms of lack of purpose?
I think purpose is still a relatively new concept, an idea for us to get our head around. If you cast your mind back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that pyramid that starts with safety and builds up to self-actualization, I think in a lot of cases, we haven't had to worry about what our purpose is. And what I mean by that is the path has almost been laid out for us. You go through education, and then some people go on to further education, some people go on to university, some people go on and get a job. And it might be because, a member of your family worked in that area, and so they get you in, or you get an apprenticeship, as my brother did, because our father worked in, British Steel. And I think in many ways, then you find yourself in work, but rarely do we stop and think, well, what's my purpose? What's important to me? And I remember having a conversation with Chris Akabusi, actually, on my own podcast. And, many people will remember him and know of him as an athlete in the kind of 80s and 90s, but a very large personality. And he's much more than that. And I can remember him saying to me, Jeff, the two most important days of our lives are the day we are born and we enter the world, and the day we realize why we're here and what our purpose is. And I don't think enough of us are open to that yet. I spent 10 years working at M&S Money, and I never really thought about my purpose. But there was something talking to me saying, what if? And, it took for me a lot of valor, a lot of courage to jump from that security to following my purpose. And I think for a lot of people, that the safety net is still in business or work and working for an employer rather than working for themselves or pursuing a different path. I think those people that are clear on their purpose are probably in the minority. So therefore, they stand out like a sore thumb. And we are tribal as human beings, and we're kind of drawn to similar people, and we become part of that tribe and don't really give it the thought early on in our career in most cases. And it usually takes a shift in circumstances or something significant in our life. And you'll hear people talk about this. I did a job that I was completely miserable for 20 years, 30 years, and then something happened. I might have lost a parent, or I might have lost a partner, or I might have lost a child, or I might have found myself on my own. And I thought at that point, hang on a minute, why am I here? What am I doing? And that's when they started to explore. I would love to explore purpose. not just with people in work, hence the book, but actually I'd love to explore it with those people that are coming through education and making really important decisions at quite an early age in their life, and then changing it later on. How many people go to university and start one course because actually they realize this is not what they want to do? How many people drop out of university because they think this is definitely not what I want to do? So I'd love to spend some time with that age group, because I think it would have a significant impact. But it's not mainstream and it's not part of any curriculum. So again, it's not the norm to have conversations around purpose.
Yeah, and I think it's the same for meaning as well. Like, I think people I think they're the two things in life where people either don't know their purpose or don't know their meaning. I think they're the sort of questions I'd love to answer in terms of helping people find them, to sort of understand why they are on this earth for that reason. I think that'd be certainly something that I'd love to delve into more.
And I think the name of your podcast, it speaks to people, because, if we conduct ourselves, with humility, then not only will we nicer to other people, but people are nicer to us, and we remain grounded in terms of what we're doing, and more like-minded people then come into our space. So I think you're onto something with where you're going, albeit, it might feel like you're in the early days with the conversations that you're having right now.
Yeah, that's good to hear. And in terms of your vehicles for change as well, in your book, you mentioned about the intentions, attentions, and distractions, and you also tally up sort of a daily and weekly planner. I think the distractions are more prevalent nowadays than possibly, the 10, 20 years ago, where we didn't have the social media, we didn't have the things that are distractions, in terms of people are looking to sort of procrastinate. And you also state really well in the book in terms of, what could you do more with even just 1% of your day, in terms of like 14, 15 minutes of your day? What things do you want to sort of describe in terms of that?
I think it's a really interesting question, because the whole attention, intention, and distraction is still a relatively new idea that I'm playing about with, and I strip it right back to the very smallest amount of time, being 1%, and I pose that question to people, because that for me is the best starting point. I've worked with lots and lots of people in the business world. I've worked with lots and lots of people from a personal coaching perspective, and they overcommit, they make excuses, they don't mean to, they let you down, they let themselves down, they don't have time for this, something else has become a priority. What I think we need to go back to is this word called priority was singular. It was, if you look back in the past, it was never meant to be plural. Okay, yet all of a sudden, how many people write to-do lists and then look at the to-do list and say, well, I've got 10 priorities today? Straight away, your time and your energy is going to be spread across those 10 things. And most of us are rubbish at concentrating on more than one thing at once. So I use the kind of AID acronym to get people to think about, if you want to make change, then that change will come from what you're already doing. And that's the reason for the 2 trackers there, is to get people to think about not just what they need to do to get to this vision of success, but what do they need to change in terms of their daily habits or their daily behaviors? Because if you tell me you have no time already and you want to work with me, well, straight away that sends off an alarm signal, because that tells me you haven't got the time. So what we need to do, Dave, is we need to look at what your day looks like and your weekend looks like, to see where those changes can be made. And if we're prepared to make those changes and get really clear on what's going to get our attention, what is our intention, and our intention links back to our vision of success, and therefore being mindful of some of those distractions, not all of them, but being mindful of some of those distractions, then we stand a better chance of moving forward. And again, I think the distractions are a really interesting one, because I think we tend to view distraction as a negative. I actually encourage people to build in some distraction time, because I'm going to hazard again, if you like listening to podcasts, some people might say, well, that's a distraction. I don't have an hour or 20 minutes to listen to a podcast. But actually, it's a really positive distraction for you because you're thinking and you're learning and you're processing. Then I encourage people to allow themselves to be distracted, because what you get in that 20 minutes or an hour will actually serve you well throughout the rest of the day. But it has a bad perception. When you also realize, as I'm sure you do, and many listeners will do, that the odds are stacked against us. Yes, there are more distractions today, but there's reasons why. Okay, I read a book by Adam Alter, which absolutely blew my mind when it comes to distractions. Okay, all the technology companies, all the social media platforms, all the games out there are designed to keep our attention. Okay, there's a reason why you get more gems or you get more rewards. The book's called Irresistible, by the way, but he drew the comparison between addiction to heroin and addiction to social media and technology as being the same. And I think when our eyes are open to that, we can't but help look at where our time and our energy is going. So I love it when people say they want to change, they're ready to work with me, or they're ready to move towards their vision of success. But for me, it's about just checking what you're doing each day and each week that you can change, and start with the smallest possible amount of time, 1%, 14.4 minutes of your day, which I think everybody could commit that amount of time to their day to bringing about some change. And you know what? It's like interest. It just builds and builds and builds. And that's when you see a change.
It's definitely achievable. Like you say, if you put it as simple as that, like say 14% or 14 minutes, sorry, is just like say 1% of your day. It makes things realize like how you can just put that intention and attention much more into sort of, like you say, a vehicle for change. And I wanted to ask as well, in terms of you using questions at the end of every chapter, like I've never come across that in a book. So I was just quite interested in terms of why did you choose to ask questions at the end of every chapter?
Again, it's a great question. And the real answer is because I come from a learning and development background. So for me, my natural environment is to be in the classroom or the training room, where you're imparting a lot of knowledge, some content, you're getting people to do exercises. And at the very end of those exercises, what you do is just to reaffirm the learning and what people have taken away, and therefore to embed it, you just ask the questions. So what have you learned from today? Or, what can you do next? Or how can you use this? So that for me comes quite natural. And I was really pleased actually when, the editors picked up on that and suggested that as part of the model, to ask those questions and provoke those thoughts again at the end of each chapter to cement, the knowledge or the ideas that were bubbling in people's minds.
I would certainly use them questions. Like I'm going to certainly look back on the book and read through them and look at the questions and sort of reflect on them myself, and certainly use the worksheets as well. I think it's just a really interesting read in terms of, like you say, once you get into sort of thinking about your fears and then looking at the 6 V's, I think they're really interesting. I've really enjoyed reading your book, and I wish you all the success with it, because I certainly think it seems to be doing very well. Looking at the Amazon in terms of your reviews and certainly looking at how that's been going for yourself.
Well, that's wonderful to hear, David. And I know through people's feedback and even through my own experience that I read a lot of books, but I don't always go back to them. And I don't always go back to them because I'm looking ahead in terms of the next chapter. I'm one of those people that will fold over pages if something's really resonated with me, and then I'll go back and I'll write that down separately, or I'll turn it into an exercise and I'll use it. So if you're encouraged to go back and answer some of those questions, then that fills me with confidence that, regardless of what you've taken at the time in terms of the content, you know there's something there that you can go back to that will provoke similar responses or thoughts within your mind. And for me, I'm over the moon with the kind words that people have written on Amazon. I remember having a conversation with one person who I know really well at the start of this journey, and they said to me, you have to be prepared to get a 1-star review on Amazon. And I am prepared at some point. Somebody will read the book and, not rate it as highly or challenge, my thoughts or my methodologies. And that's cool, that's the world we live in. But it's really humbling for me to read over those reviews that people have written already. I mean, the book's only been out, 2.5, 3 weeks. So I'm really chuffed with how it's been received and what we can do next with it in terms of helping people really who are at a point, maybe a juncture or a crossroads in terms of their career, not really sure what to do, not really sure who to speak to. Hopefully they'll come across this book and it'll help them in some way.
That's great to hear. And is there any scope for any further writing, or does it kind of give you a bug to write any further? Because I know a lot of people, obviously, as soon as they write one book, then they want to write another, and it's just that they get that sort of bug for doing it. Have you got that intention of maybe doing another one?
Yeah, I wanted, as soon as the first one was in with the editors and that draft was being looked at, I knew in my mind that I wanted to write again. Again, because of my background in learning development, I didn't just want the book to be just the book. So the plan is to run some programs this year to take people through the 6 steps as individuals, or indeed take it into organizations, and we can put teams through it. And then also later on in this year to launch a program for practitioners so that people can come along and spend 2 days with me and some of my coaches and work through the methodology in a way that we would facilitate it or support people from a coaching perspective. So there's still a bit to do with the programs for this book, but I am excited about sitting down towards the end of this year and looking at what book 2 might be. And strangely enough, I've got a conversation with one of my mentors and one of the people on my personal board next week to really just thrash out what that might be. Because actually lots of people who have read the book have come back to me already and said, have you thought about writing one for leaders? Have you thought about writing one for teams? Have you thought about writing one for entrepreneurs or people that run their own business using the 6V framework? So it fills me with confidence that I've put something out there that is transferable. I just want to make sure that it's had time to kind of land, and some of the programs that I've talked about can get off the ground, and then I'll sit down and write again at the end of the year.
Yeah, it sounds interesting in terms of like people even just sort of feeding back to you like, oh, have you thought about writing this and writing that? So that's really good that people have seen maybe a market for you to sort of delve into and using, like you said, the 6 V's as a driver for that. And I just want to give you sort of a final couple of questions on my podcast. And the usual questions I ask all my guests is, what does it mean to be human?
I think that's such a wonderful question. And I've pondered on this because I expected it, having listened to a couple of your guests already. For me, being human is being brave enough to show up as you each day. And I haven't always been able to do that. And for a large proportion of my life, I appeared to be somebody that I was not. So for me now, through this journey, actually, I'm just going to show up as me. And those people that, are open to that will connect with me, and, we'll go wherever we go. Those people aren't, then I will find myself spending less and less time with them.
I think that's such a thing that people are going through, like, or have gone through, where they just sort of struggle to some sort of be brave and accept who they are sometimes. I think that is something that, you know, a lot of people have gone through. Are going through. So I think that's a really different look at that sort of question. So I thought I like that sort of answer. It's certainly different. And I'd like to ask as well is what keeps you to stay humble? What?
I am so fortunate that I have a good partner and wife who keeps me grounded. My kids do as well, and they inspire me to carry on being who I am and showing up as who I am. The line I want to leave you with is usually what happens when I leave the house to go and work for a client, albeit I'm talking over 12 months ago. My wife, Emma, knows how energetic and passionate I get. And every time I leave the house to work with a client, she says one thing to me: be you and don't be a dickhead. And I share it because I know sometimes that I've been a dickhead. Not intentionally. I get excited, and there's a story in the book about the guy who wanted to jump out of an aeroplane, and I was a dickhead that day in terms of how I kind of probed and goaded him. And that's what keeps me humble, is knowing that the closest people to me love me, know what I do, know what I'm passionate about, and can tell me in a very simple and straightforward way, just go and be you. Don't be.
I love that, because that's sort of what my girlfriend does as well, in terms of she uses that sort of similar line as well. So it's so like, it's just something so similar. That's just, yeah. And Jeff, what I want to give you now is obviously a bit of a platform to sell your book. I'd like to sell what you do as your full-time job. So I just wanted to give you a bit of a platform for where people can go to search for where you are.
The best place people can go is to the Stuck Now What website. They'll find a link to the book. They'll find a link to download the workbook, which if they like to make lots of notes and don't like to write all over a book itself, then they can download that for free. If they're unsure and want a taster, then they can download chapter 1, and they'll find links to the programs that I'm doing as well. So if it's not for you, it's not for you. If you don't feel like you're in any way stuck, then great. Don't seek out the website, and certainly don't buy the book. I would happily give a couple of your listeners a copy of the book if indeed people are interested, and this is connected with them in any way. So David, feel free, should anybody reach out to you on the back of this episode through your podcast, genuinely interested in that space, then I'm more than happy to send you a couple of books, and you can distribute them out to whoever.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Like I say, I'm sure people, get in touch and do that. And like I say, I'll put all your information in the podcasting notes. But Jeff, I just want to thank you for giving me your time and just sharing about, Stuck Now What. And I obviously, I wish you all the best with the book. And I certainly think it's going to certainly change a number of people's lives of what you've already done. Obviously, reading the stories from within the book, you've changed a number of people's lives and careers. And I hope that you can carry on doing that, Jeff.
David, it's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you first and foremost for reaching out on LinkedIn and starting that conversation. Having listened to a couple of your episodes, I love what your podcast is about, and so to be invited along and to spend a short amount of time, answering some of your questions and sharing a bit of the book has been an absolute joy and pleasure. So thank you for inviting me along.
Thank you for staying humble with me, Jeff.